I must be in heaven. I've been asked so many times today about my favorite Meet the Press story, and this will be the only time I talk about Meet the Press. It was back in 1992. Ross Perot was running for president. He was ahead of Bill Clinton and George Herbert Walker Bush in the polls. He came on Meet the Press, and I said, Mr. Perot, you said the deficit is the biggest problem confronting the country. What's your solution? He said, what? He said, if I knew you were going to ask me these kind of trick questions, I wouldn't be on your program. So he got rather feisty. The show was over. I went to the airport. The flight attendant ran down the aisle and said, that Ross Perot, what do you think of him? I said, ma'am, I never comment about my guest or my opinion of their performance, but I'm endlessly curious as a viewer, as a voter, as a flight attendant, what did you think of Ross Perot? She put her head down and said, he strikes me as the kind of guy that would never return his tray table to the upright position. I want to talk today about my journey and that of my family. My dad left school in the 10th grade to volunteer to fight in World War II. He was terribly injured when his B-24 Liberator crashed. He spent 6 months in a military hospital. And then he came home, met my mom, and began a second mission, and that was to raise and educate his 4 kids. And he did it by working 2 full-time jobs for 30 years. He was a truck driver and a sanitation man, and he never complained. To this day, he's 82 years old. He thinks his glass is half full, 2/3 full on most mornings. And yet, when he and my mom came together, he realized that his job was to bring home those incomes. My mom would put the 4 of us at a kitchen table, myself and my 3 sisters. We had to be home at 4:45. We didn't have play dates back then. We just played in the street. And while my mom cooked, we would do our homework, and we couldn't trade our pencil for a fork until she had signed off on every assignment. It was amazing the way she trained us, the discipline, the accountability. And I was reinforced in school with Sister Mary Lucille, who summoned me to the front of the room with one of these. Timothy, we need to find an alternative vehicle to channel your excessive energy. And she started a school newspaper and made me the editor and the publisher and the stapler and the collator and the mimeographer. But I fell in love with writing and journalism, and because of my work on the paper, I won a scholarship to Canisius High School, the Jesuit high school, far on the other side of the tracks, not where the sons of garbage men and truck drivers went, but the sons of doctors and lawyers and the more affluent. But I met Father John Sturm, the prefect of discipline, who the 3rd day threw me against the lockers for some perceived indiscretion. And I said, Father, please, I'm new here. Don't you have any mercy? He said, Russert, mercy's for God. I deliver justice. At every step of the way, it was accountability, discipline, persistence, the same lessons of life, coming from men and women who understood that this young child with his wide eyes could have easily gone off and gotten into mischief and worse. But they invested in him. They loved him. They reached out to him. They supported him. They connected with him. And because of my work on the high school, the first person in my family to go to college, my first person to go to law school, I went to work for Daniel Patrick Moynihan in the United States Senate. He surrounded himself with Harvard whiz kids. And I said, Senator, I'm not cut out for this. I didn't go to Ivy League. I didn't grow up this way. He said, walk with me. He said, understand and remember one thing. What they learned in school, you can always learn. What you know growing up the way you did, they will never know. It changed my life, and I decided that I wanted to write a book which affirmed those lessons of life. In 2004, Big Russ and me, father and son, lessons of life, because I wanted people to understand this generation before us. We stand on their shoulders. We could not do what we do today but for them. And as I went around the country, I was amazed by the response. Make it out to Big Mike. Make it out to Big Jose. Make it out to Big Irv, Big Manuel, Big Mike. It didn't matter what ethnicity, what geography, what race, religion. People wanted to tell the stories of their dads and their families. Red state, blue state, bonded because we had one thing in common, who we were and where we came from and how invaluable those lessons were. And my dad, who is a man of very few words, but who taught me more by the quiet eloquence of his hard work, I said, Dad, here's a book about you. Called him the next day. I said, Dad, you haven't told me. Did you read the book? He said, I'm doing a chapter tonight. I'll let you know how it is. Finally, in Thanksgiving of 2004, I was home with my wife, Maureen, who's here with me today, and our son, Luke. He loaded the car, and we always have perfected this kind of half handshake, half hug, and that was the way we said goodbye. And suddenly he engulfed me in a bear hug and said, I love you. I said, what did you say? He said, you heard me. But I realized the connection that will never be equaled. And that Christmas of that year, we came home from midnight mass, and Luke was getting ready for bed, took his shirt off, and Maureen came running and said, you won't believe this. What is this? I can't believe it. Luke has a tattoo. I said, a tattoo? How could he? We talked about the health consequences. What, Luke, get in here. Let me see. What is going on with you? He walked in. I said, lift up your arm. He said, no. I said, lift up your arm. And he lifted it up, and there in blue block letters, the initials T.J.R. My father is Timothy Joseph Russert. I am Timothy John Russert. He looked up and said, I read your book, and I just want you to know, I always want you and Grandpa on my side. I said, that is the nicest tattoo you could ever have in my entire life. But it meant so much to us as a family, as a father and a son, as a father, a son, and a grandson, because he understood who he was and where he came from. And as I stand on my dad's shoulders, he stands on mine. I lost my mom last August. And indeed, grief is the price we do pay for love. Such a special lady who woke me up every day of my life growing up as a little boy by saying, Tim, Tim, Tim. No loud voice, no alarm clock, but she had a direct frequency to my heart and taught me that you don't have to make a lot of noise in order for people to pay attention to you. Something that's invaluable to everything I do each and every Sunday. In all these people who stood up and stood by me, there's a silent goodness. And it exists all across this country. And it is so essential that we step back and accept it, embrace it. The leaders of this country are not born to kings and queens. They are born to the sons and daughters of immigrants and pioneers. That's who we are. Time is our most precious commodity. You never get it back. And yet, every moment you spend with a child or with a loved one is invaluable, immeasurable. You never know what twist opens that jar. They will remember it. When I wrote Big Russ, I received 60,000 letters and emails from sons and daughters all across the country saying, like Wilma from Ohio, I was a worrier and my dad built a little worry box. And he said, Wilma, sit down. Put every worry you have in the box. 2 weeks later, we sat down. He said, you see, this one's gone away. This one solved itself. This one turned out for the better. This one doesn't matter anymore. She'll always remember her dad for that box, for that moment he spent with her. Not one of the letters or emails was about an expensive gift or a vacation. It was a moment that made a difference in someone's life. That is what this conference is all about. I believe that is what our earthly mission is all about. The greatest speech I ever heard in my life was all of 15 words. The best exercise for the human heart is reaching down and picking someone else up. That is what life is so precious and all about. And so, Meet the Press in its 59th year is important to me, and I work very, very hard to make sure that we bring quality and substantive discussions. But far beyond all that has been this journey, particularly over the last 4 years. There has not been a day in my life in the last 4 years where someone has not called me or sent an email or a letter or stopped me in the hallway or on the street to say, can I tell you about my dad? Can I tell you about a teacher? Can I tell you about my mom? Can I tell you about somebody who intervened in my life, who taught me that time is the most precious commodity, and they gave it to me? And that's what you've done today, and I hope far into the future, starting tomorrow. God bless.